And welcome everybody to episode 17 of DigiTales. I'm your host Faizan Syed, and today we have our guest, Zeeshan Baig, the country manager of Careem in Pakistan. How are you, Zeeshan?
Assalamualaikum Razan. Thank you very much. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your show.
Walaikum salam. So, Zeeshan, I'll kick it off. I'll jump right into it. Right before you joined, I had a little survey done in our office, and Careem is a very, very popular uh, tool resource in this office, as it is, I'm sure, everywhere else. And so I got a survey done. I said, okay, guys, we're going to have this conversation with Zeeshan. Please give me some feedback on Careem. And so here, it's on this list. I'm going to read it out. Very expensive. That was the most common. Packages were economical to the masses, but not anymore. So again, pricing. It's unsafe for women. Peak hours is a problem. Why are we charged if the guy is not right? And it goes on. And live chat, a lot of people seem to talk about. So pricing, what happened? Careem used to be super cheap, and it built a market, and suddenly it's become inaccessible.
Awesome. So I think you've started with a difficult question. All right, perfect. So I think very valid question. So I'll address them one by one. So when it comes to pricing, so I think first of all, we need to understand that this is a model where there are two main stakeholders. One is, of course, all the customers who are availing this facility. And then there are a lot of captains as well, the drivers. We call them captains. Now, any pricing done for any service has to be a balance for both of these. So at some point, the captains who are serving for us, they have to have some good economics and they have to be making some money so that they can run their homes as well. So that's one part of the story. The other part is, of course, customers. Right now, if you look at Pakistan for the past 3 years, our inflation has been close to double digits, right? Whereas if you look at our base prices, the increase have not been matched with inflation. So although prices have slightly gone up, but then again, these are still subsidized. These are still, we have to put in some finances to make sure that our captains are making money. So that's how the pricing is done. With that said, of course, pricing is a domain. I mean, in Pakistan, there are all kinds of segments, right? So there will always be some segments for which Careem will be overpriced, and there will be always some segments who will continue to use Careem for a certain car type in a certain price bracket. With that said, of course, there are multiple opportunities. Getting into lower segments is a big opportunity in itself. And now also, if you talk about pricing of Careem, don't only look at only one car type, which is cars, right? We offer bikes. For bikes, the average trip fare is less than $1. Similarly, there are rickshaws, there's Go Mini, and then there are sedan cars as well. So the pricing varies from car type to car type, and people's ability to pay, their propensity to pay, has been incorporated in the pricing we've designed for various car types. So I hope I've addressed the question.
Do you think that the varying degrees of service offering, यानी कि बाइक भी है, कार भी है, रिक्शा भी है, हर चीज मौजूद है, तो आप ये कह रहे हैं कि भाई you have a right solution, यानी कि logistic solution available to you based on what you can afford?
Absolutely. So the idea here is like with a certain car type, for example, cars. Of course, cars की एक asset value है जो गाड़ी चला रहा है. They've invested a certain money. They expect a certain return as well. Not all customers will be able to use those cars, right? And this was even true before Careem as well. So for those people, there are rickshaws, there's bike as well. So depending on the sort of pocket size, there are various options still available with Careem.
लेकिन इसमें I think the concern that was raised, and this is again, as you're growing a market, right? ये पहली दफा आया था Careem, let's say about 5 years ago, and it's a market grow key. There was nothing like this in the country, and so it heavily subsidized the fares and the rides to get people to try it. तो लोगों की आदत खराब हो गई ना एक तरह से कि यार heavily subsidized में क्लिफ्टन से नाज़िमाबाद आप गाड़ी में 500 रुपए के अंदर पहुंच सकते थे, ठीक है ना? अब वो शायद नहीं हो सकता है. तो ये आदत खराब करके क्या एक perception खराब होता है? क्या do you lose customers? I mean, how do you tackle that? I understand that there's the pricing issue is built on inflation and asset values and all of that, but it's also a function of perception.
It is very true. So I think usually for all these startups, right, the tech sector where when we launched Careem, we were at the time where growth was the main thing, right? Investors, even company internally, all stakeholders related to any company were looking at growth. right? So us case mein, if you pick up any startup in the world, they do subsidize. And by subsidizing, I mean they would put in money from their own pockets as well to subsidize that. But of course, this is not sustainable because इसी तरह है जितना, for example, public sector में आज अगर metro launch होती है तो government subsidizes it, right? But this is not sustainable. They will never be able to sustain it, perpetually. So the same thing happens with these startups as well. So when Careem came in, of course, it had to be subsidized because trial generate करवाना था, customers को बताना था कि what exactly is the service, and then in order to sustain, not only for Careem itself but also for the stakeholders who were involved, जिसमें हमारे captains हैं, उनकी sustainability के लिए the prices had to reach to a certain level. Now let me give you an example. So I live in Lahore. So Lahore, say, depends where I live. Distance is probably around 5-6 kilometers. Before Careem, I used to pay around 1,800 rupees on a local cab, right? With Careem coming in, it went down to as low as 300 rupees. Now it's around 550-600 rupees, right? So, if you anchor or if you take benchmark as the pre-Careem era, so abhi bhi Careem is like 40-50% cheaper than those options which were available back in those days. और पहली बात है
लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये है, और ये बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट आपने रेज किया है, प्रॉब्लम ये है कि लोग वो भूल जाते हैं, वो सिर्फ ये देखते हैं कि यार करीम 300 पे था, अब देखें डबल हो गया, 600 पे हो गया, उन्होंने किस तरह प्राइसेस बढ़ा दिए हैं. I think, do you think it's a function of the way that value proposition is communicated?
I think it's a function of multiple things. One is, of course, we can do much better job in terms of value proposition, and this is something that we continuously, keep on evaluating and improving. One thing a lot of people basically discount is the inflation, right? Pakistan में देखें, जिस मैंने अभी बताया, double-digit inflation चल रही है. Whereas I can pick up Careem's prices 3 years back, and I can guarantee you कि जितनी inflation हुई ना उससे कम है price increases, right? So people have to start, anchoring themselves to the fact कि भाई अगर inflation आ रही है, so it will come to transportation as well because cost of operations go up, right? Fuel महंगा हो गया, गाड़ियों की maintenance महंगी हो गई, ठीक है, हाउसहोल्ड इनकम्स जो है, उनके खर्चे बढ़ गए, उनकी रिक्वायरमेंट ज्यादा है अर्निंग्स की. सो आई थिंक ऑन अ कस्टमर साइड एज वेल, अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल नीड टू सॉर्ट ऑफ अंडरस्टैंड दिस एज वेल, बिकॉज ये नहीं है कि जी करीम ने खुद ही से प्राइसेस बढ़ा दी. इट इज अ कॉम्पोनेंट ऑफ सप्लाई एंड डिमांड. आज अगर हम लो प्राइसेस पे ले जाते हैं ना, सो पीपल हु आर वर्किंग फॉर अस, कैप्टन जिनकी वजह से हम एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, दे विल स्टार्ट चर्निंग आउट. जब वो जाना शुरू होंगे, योर एक्सपीरियंस विल ड्रास्टिकली डिटोरिएट, राइट? वो आपके जो ETAs होते हैं, सो एस्टिमेटेड टाइम ऑफ अराइवल, जितनी देर में गाड़ी आती है, दैट विल सिग्निफिकेंटली इंक्रीज. सो सर्विस क्वालिटी बहुत बुरी हो जाएगी. एंड इसकी वन एग्जांपल इज द कोविड पीरियड, राइट? Unfortunately, in the COVID period, we had to close our operations. जब start किए तो we couldn't subsidize, right? Because Careem के survival का भी question था at some point in time. So जब वो किया, so we actually saw कि काफी सारे negative impact आना शुरू हो गया on the service quality. अब अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह, like we are in a position जहाँ पे we've gotten the customer base back, captain base भी आ गई हुई है, we're providing the right experience as well. But these 6 months were pretty tough, financially as well as experience point of view as well.
How do you see Baikia? Is it a threat to your business? They just raised a whole bunch of money. It's a homegrown startup out of Pakistan, and they're really sort of picking up market share. Is that a market that you are going after actively? Do you see them as a threat?
So I think interesting question. So Munib is a very dear friend as well, and I really respect the kind of work they've done in Pakistan and the kind of impact they've made for Pakistan. To be honest, I was one of those people who was really happy when I got to know that they've raised almost $13 million. Now, the reason I'm saying that is Careem truly believes that, healthy competition is actually good. It will keep us on our feet. And of course, it will make sure the service that's been offered to the customers is of the right standard as well. Now, having that said, to your question, is Baikia a threat? In my view, I am not considering them as a threat. In fact, the opportunity size is so huge. We are living in a country with a population of 200 million plus people, right? And bike ownership is super, super high. So it is a huge opportunity. So single player cannot even, capitalize the entire opportunity. So even
why not buy them out?
I think, if you want to buy a company, there are a few things that you probably look at. One is, of course, whether you have that capability by yourself or not. Second is, of course, like talent and all other factors as well. So as far as Careem is concerned, and I think to be honest, there's no hard and fast decision on this, but this is my own personal view that, currently we also feel that in terms of execution, in terms of having the right platform, in terms of technology, we have all the components there in terms of talent as well. So I think right now it's better that both of these players continue operating independently, because of course, if let's say there's the monopoly or acquisition happens, then of course there will be some compromises in terms of service quality as well. So this is a big opportunity. Both players, in fact, I would say that even two players are less. There should be more players. So the bike opportunity is so huge that even 3-4 players can continue to grow on double digits and continue to offer good services to the customers. So basically, this is the point. Bikea, in my view, is not a threat. Actually, they are helping us, and Careem is helping them open, untapping various segments, educating people. Because in this segment, people don't even know how to use smartphones, right? So if Bikea or Careem comes up with an option where people can call in and call the bike, that's like unlocking a certain segment. So
You
again,
talked
it goes to
about
the size of
you talked about multiple players being in this segment. Uber, for some reason, did not survive. I mean, this is pre-acquisition of Careem, but Uber always struggled in Pakistan, even though there was opportunity for multiple players, even in the car segment. Why is that? Why did Uber struggle when Careem didn't?
So I think there are a couple of things. So it's not one thing that I can tell you and definitely say that this is why Kareem worked. There are a couple of things that happened. One is, of course, when Kareem came in with the model of localization, right? So every marketing campaign that you've seen for Kareem, we probably ended up spending a fraction of what FMCG spent on a certain campaign with the same output, right? So every marketing campaign was super localized. So, for example, I don't know if you remember or not, we came up with crazy campaigns like Rishta Auntie, onboarding Wasim Akram, making him CEO of Kareem for a day. So these are the campaigns which were super local. People started associating Kareem with Pakistan and being a local company. So I think that was one. Second was, I think, if you look at talent, the kind of talent Kareem was able to acquire was really exceptional. Like we've seen people who've joined from US, MIT, Duke, a consulting background.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really, in long term, what really makes a difference is the team you have. So I think these two factors are super important. And thirdly, I think if you look at a product as well, Kareem was very local. So for example, one of the biggest challenges for ride-hailing companies back in the days were how do we acquire captains or drivers offline, right? Because traditionally Uber only had a channel which was a digital channel, and in Pakistan, like only 35% of the people are connected to networks, and
Mm-hmm.
online presence and data presence is even super low. So how do you crack that? Kareem came up with a model of franchises where you set up certain franchises, which was now replicated by all the players in the industry, whether it's by Kia or Uber as well, right? So
Right.
this was one example of being super local and capitalizing on the local opportunity. So I think this was, in my view, is the biggest factor that helped Kareem sort of grow, and Uber struggled on this front. So
And
yeah.
so now the fact that the acquisition has happened, I mean, it's been acquired by an international dominant player, right? All the things that you just mentioned that allowed Kareem to really excel in Pakistan will disappear because of this, right? I mean, Uber is a global company, it's American, it's international. It's acquired Kareem, the localization will end, it becomes bureaucratic. एक दफा आप एक बड़ी कंपनी का हिस्सा बन जाते हैं तो रेड टेप, ब्यूरोक्रेसी, लेयर्स, वो सारी चीजें किक इन कर जाती हैं. तो क्या करीम का सर्वाइवल इस वजह से will it become challenged under the ownership of a dominant big player? And secondly, it's no longer, the hunger isn't there, right? पहले the startup, the founders were hungry कि यार हमने एक चीज बनाई है, our goal is growth and then acquisition or IPO. It's usually one outcome or the other कि मैंने बना के grow करके investment लेके sort of VCs से and so on. I need an exit. The exit is an IPO or it's an acquisition. अब exit हो गया है तो अब वो पैशन भी नहीं रहा, वो ड्राइव भी नहीं रहा, प्लस ये जो आपने लोकलाइजेशन वाली बातें की वो भी चली गई हैं. तो क्या करीम will it be hampered because of these reasons?
To your answer, I think the straight answer is absolutely not. So let me tell you a couple of things. So पहली बात तो ये जो the deal dynamics of this acquisition, this is not a merger, right, where only one brand will exist. This is an acquisition where Careem will continue to operate as a separate entity, just like Kia and Hyundai, right? Both of these competitors are same parent holding company. They're competing. They're doing really well. So that's the same philosophy. All the decision making will happen independently for Careem. And part of deal is that the culture we have, the DNA we have, it will remain like that. And to your second point, so I think in terms of sustainability, I have iota of doubt. Teams locally as well as the leadership are even more hungry. Now, if you talk about the top leadership, you mentioned that the goal was IPO. To be honest, goal was only IPO. Kareem's mission is basically simplifying and improving lives of people, and it does not restrict itself to a certain area or a certain service. The ambition is much more ambitious. Now, in the region, there are over 700 million people whom we believe that we can simplify and improve their lives. So far, with our super app coming in, we've only touched 33 million of those users. So imagine the kind of opportunity we're talking about. So any company who's basically established on the fact on such a strong purpose, regardless acquisition happens, regardless there's some representation of Uber on the board as well, it doesn't really matter, because end of the day, the thing that will make any company organization different is their belief in the mission and the purpose. And as far as that is concerned, I can confidently say that we are even more ambitious than before. I don't know if you've seen the past 6 months or not. We've done so many things like payment solutions, coming up with super app, delivery, food launch, and we continue to expand like that. So I think there's no doubt on the ambition level, and I am 100% confident that we are heading in the right direction, both locally as well as globally.
And the super app is a good point, because the super app is a very ambitious project. Now, a super app has not worked in the Western markets, which have been more developed on the, let's say, the app technology side than, let's say, where we are today. But it's done really well in China. So where do you think the GCC, Pakistan, South Asia will fall? Is Pakistan going to take a super app approach to China, or to the US, where it just never worked?
Very interesting question. I think if you look at this, basically boils down to the communal culture values we have in the West as well as in the East. Now, if you look at US is primarily an individualistic market, right? You work there as an individual. You want your own space. You do everything individually, right? And the same behavior is reflected otherwise in Eastern countries. These are all very community-led companies where you believe in clubbing things together. You believe in shopping malls, super malls, where basically there are a lot of brands under one umbrella, so that you can go there with families. So I think it basically lies in the philosophy of the way people think in these two regions. Now, in eastern part of the world, which includes Pakistan as well, people prefer clubbing things together, whether it's represented through community meetups or super malls as well. So, for example, one example is in the US, super malls doesn't work, even in Europe. Whereas in this part of the world, Dubai, Pakistan, super mall, people are crazy about super mall, because they go there, they want everything in a single shop. And this is the behavior we've seen in China versus US. Now, if you look at China, people prefer having multiple options under the same platform, right? Whether it's in form of a physical physical mall, or an application. We have amazing example of WeChat as well as Alipay. They've clubbed various services for the customers there, and they love those services. So I think this is the same belief that basically sort of comes in Pakistan and this region as well. This is how people think in our part of the world. So in my view, super app is absolutely the right way to go about. And one more thing I was reading the other day. Imagine in this part of the world, and this is very different from what happens in the US. In this part of the world, almost 5 out of 10 apps installed are deleted in first 2 days. So imagine the kind of applications we have in this. I mean, we're super crowded with these applications. And imagine one app coming in and providing all the daily use services in a single platform. So this will be a game changer.
And so in this super app, one of the things that there is a big demand for is logistics services. Yet no one seems to have organized that sector. आपको अगर सुजुकी रेंट करनी है, कोई सामान शिफ्ट करना है, वो राउंड अबाउट पे अभी भी खड़े हुए होते हैं, ठीक है ना, या फिर किसी का नंबर होता है या पिकअप लेना होता है. ये जो लॉजिस्टिक्स शॉर्ट हॉल डिलीवरी होती है, ठीक है, लॉन्ग हॉल की मैं बात भी नहीं कर रहा हूँ कि लॉन्ग हॉल इंटर प्रोविंस और फिर नेशनल. इस पे there's a lot of unused cargo space, ठीक है, that can be monetized if it's organized. Why haven't you guys looked at that space? Or if you have, why haven't you added into your, let's say, super app offerings?
Yes. I think rightly pointed out, this itself is a huge opportunity. Chahiye within whether it's intracity or intercity, it is a huge opportunity. Now it's basically a matter of prioritization. So we believe, when if we are to basically serve for our mission, which is simplifying and improving lives of people, the first thing we need to do is provide basic transportation medium to people so that people can move from one place to another thing, and then we'll start moving towards mobility of things. So delivery on bikes is, for example, one step toward that. Now these
Mm-hmm.
ride hailing, delivery of food, delivery of things, in itself is a big opportunity, right? So we can't capitalize on all the other opportunities that exist in the market. Now, to your question, maybe down the road after a year or 2 years, this could be a new opportunity where we tap in. But we want to be very, very focused in terms of making sure whatever we're doing right now, we are providing the right quality, we are providing the right service. And once we feel that, we're confident that we've penetrated into this segment pretty much, then we can start thinking about these other segments as well. So it's basically just a matter of prioritization. For us right now, this is the priority. Going forward, of course, priorities can also change, and we can move towards, we call it B2B logistics as well.
Makes sense. So I'm gonna switch. Well, before I switch gears, regulation. Okay,
Yes.
is regulation supporting the growth of Careem the way it should in this country today? And this is
Very
keeping the
interesting.
super app in mind, huh? Not just the transport part of it.
Yes. No, I think very interesting question. Now, Faizan, to your question, one of the dilemma we have been facing, whether we were a player in ride hailing or we become a super app, was in Pakistan, these online marketplaces are not even recognized. If you go to any ministry, any government stakeholder, you talk about technology and they'll say, okay, software houses. They'll take two, three names. But nobody recognizes that these online platforms are very, very different from these software houses. Now, for us, like for example, just to give you an example and tell you the scale of the complexity, after 18th Amendment, all these transportation laws are regional subject, right? So what applies
Correct.
to us in Sindh is very different to what applies to us in Punjab and what applies to us in KP. That's for transportation. For food, again, that comes under logistic, very different regulations,
Correct.
province-wise and even service-wise. So these are the challenges that we face now in terms of support from the government. Although all the stakeholders have been very, very supportive, we've been talking to them. But generally, what should happen is that there should be one umbrella. Maybe it could be IT ministry, who basically is sort of guardian for these online platforms. Now, if you're facing any challenge on transport front, on taxation, on regulation, we just go to them. We should talk to them, and they should support us on getting organized things rather than us running after various provinces. Similarly for food as well, the same thing will come for payments as well. So this is pretty complex. And I think also one more thing, interesting fact, in transportation we've worked with the different regulatory bodies to come up with a draft law where they've started recognizing online platforms, especially in the ride hailing front. Now, they will be coming up with certain regulations which are good. We are supportive of those regulations, but reality is the capability to operationally execute those by public sector doesn't exist at the moment. So, for example, in Punjab, there's a discussion ongoing that ride hailing should be regulated, which is fine. So, captains or drivers will have to apply for a fitness certificate and a route permit, to be enabled to drive on Careem. Now imagine if there's not one window operation where all of this can be done digitally. What kind of hassle or barricade are we talking about for the growth of this business? So we will end up collecting some licensing fee. However, we lose a lot of new captains who wanted to come and register with us, and as a result, business gets impacted. So while I'm fully supportive of all these regulations, it is imperative for all the regulations and government bodies to look at the operations itself as well, because currently the kind of operations that exist, does not support the growth of the business. So I think it comes down to ease of business as well. So these are the things that needs to be looked at from a government point of view.
There was a good initiative that the government had started under the umbrella of Digital Pakistan, but then they went and proceeded to fire the individual who was leading that initiative. Will that impact Careem and its super app? The fact that there isn't an organized approach towards a digital nation and there isn't a one person, let's say, leading and driving this mission?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, in my personal view, it was a good initiative, and I was hoping that something really big will come out of that initiative. But talking about Careem, to be honest, Careem is a company of resilient people. When we launched in Pakistan, every single individual, I still remember launching in Peshawar and in Faisalabad, every single individual used to say that this will not work, you know, and women will never use it. It's unsafe. Why would a passenger at night in Karachi sit with a random, captain? This will never work. It ended up working. And the entire reason for that was the belief that's in the DNA of this organization. So anything, any target, whether it's internal target or launching in a new city or launching a new service altogether, we've been super super ambitious, and our aspiration have been pretty high. And because we're all very resilient, the belief we have in ourselves has enabled us to, alhamdulillah, deliver really well. So despite of this initiative being killed, the Digital Pakistan, we're pretty confident in Careem, and I think we have been getting the right support from all the stakeholders who are somewhat related to Careem, whether through government or internally. So I think to Careem, inshallah, we'll continue to do great.
So now I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to come to sort of this interesting point. You've had an interesting background. You worked in the, let's say, telecom, Ericsson, I believed, and then you went into consulting. And from consulting, you came into this role. One of the things I remember when I was switching from banking, when I was switching from a business or operations life from my past career into banking, one of the things we used to make fun of in banking was that the bankers do all the work, consultants only make arts and charts, and that consultants can never run and operate a business. Is that true? Did you find it challenging leaving the consulting role and coming into an operations role full time?
Yeah, I think this is a stereotype with a lot of consultants. Now, let me tell you one thing. So the part of I was working for Deloitte in the Middle East and the US, and the part of consulting wing I was working for is called strategy and operations. Now, Deloitte is very different from MBBs like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. Deloitte is into a lot of execution as well. So there is a strategy work stream, but then there's a very strong operations work stream as well, which actually helps client execute all the strategy that have been devised. So I was involved in a lot of execution projects as well. So an average project in Deloitte, which included execution, was probably around 6 months. So I've done like 5-6 of those projects, which entailed execution. Now, switching gears towards a startup and coming to Careem, I think this was the best decision I've ever taken. And if I really recall, I think there are a lot of things that I've learned from consulting that I was able to leverage in Careem and get a better output. So, for example, consulting teaches you how to structure data, how to structure unstructured information, and get something meaningful out of it. Honestly, when I joined Careem, everything was all over the place. There were no processes established. Execution was being done in a very ad hoc manner. So when I took over certain areas where I was leading, I was able to organize a lot of things, develop processes, look for, organize all the information that was there, look at different market segments, make much more informed decision making rather than taking just an ad hoc decision. And I think initially when Careem was launching, of course, people were required who would immediately execute. You tell them something, they do it. But as the company grew, the kind of people it required slightly changed because a lot of data was there, and people who could actually look at unstructured information and comprehend something meaningful out of it and take decisions accordingly were required. And that was one thing I feel I learned a lot from consulting, and that was one thing which I've really leveraged in Careem, and it has been very, very helpful for me personally. So I think to your point, consulting actually gave an advantage to me for working for a startup. And if you look at a lot of consultants, they end up working in startups. So a lot of my batchmates in Deloitte, they ended up working for startups. Some of them are still working for those companies.
So it's basically the ability to take sort of disparate information that's unstructured and make sense out of it. And I think that's the biggest sort of what you find in a startup environment is that there's a lot of disparate information, a lot of uncertainty, lack of clarity, and be able to collect that, organize it, and then take a view on then how to go forward. I think that makes sense from a sort of that career switch point of view. But if you now look at your experience today, execution, sort of getting things done, operations, top three things that are important for an individual to have if they're entering this role, like an operations role, working in a company, getting things done rather than sitting and creating arts and charts behind a desk. What would those three things be?
I think number one, in my view, to be honest, is the attitude. Now, any individual who I have hired or worked with, whether they're from Harvard or INSEAD or XYZ university, if that particular individual doesn't have the right attitude, it will not work. Let me give you a quick example. Like when I was hired in Deloitte, I was probably amongst the people who were from the worst university. I was from LUMS, and my counterparts were from Harvard, MIT, Yale, all of these top-notch universities. And I thought I'd never be able to compete with them because intellectually, technically, they were all superior. Fast forward 3 years down the road, I was, as compared to them, from a lot of them, I got earlier promotions. I was in a track called Partners Track as well, which is 9-year track to partner. And I realized the only thing that differentiated me from them was basically my attitude, because Pakistanis, we are generally very, very humble. So in early days, if any partner used to tell me to go and do a formatting for a certain slide or certain deck, I would happily do that. Whereas people from Harvard and those universities would say that, I'm not trained, or I'm not trained to do these kind of things. I only want to work on a real project. So when you have the right attitude, people start trusting you. So my partners started trusting me. And when your partners started trusting you, of course, you continue to grow because they feel that you're much more reliable than any other individual who might be, intellectually superior. So I think the same thing goes for these startups as well. I've personally worked with a lot of intellectual people in startup, and few of those who did not have the right attitude, regardless of their work experience, regardless of their credentials, they did not work well. They could not deliver in this startup environment. So I think the first thing to have is the right
attitude would be the first one. And then what else?
Second thing is the resilience. Now, in startup and in Careem, I've been in situation numerous times where people have said that, this will not work. And, people have questioned certain things. People have said that, this cannot work at all. So unless you're resilient and you believe in yourself and you believe in your team and the purpose that the company has, you'll not be able to deliver. So I think second thing is this. And third, in my view, is, to be honest, time management. I'm very particular about time management. In these startups, one thing which I could improve is basically time management. A lot of these new gen or, next generation kids are pretty casual about when it comes to time management. But trust me, if you're able to manage your time correctly, you will get respected across board. And just to give one example, like for example, my father and even myself, I'm an early riser, so I wake up 6 in the morning. From 6 to 9 a.m., I do not touch my mobile. I usually do gym. These days, I'm doing cycling. Those are the best productive hours I can even imagine throughout the day. So talking about time management, I think if a person can take out some time for his own self, I think you end up reflecting a lot and you end up performing better at work. So I think time management is the third thing I would say is super, super critical.
Where does competence fit on your list? Would you put competence anywhere? I mean, is competence taught, acquired? Yes. I mean, is it not important?
No, I think, to be honest, like the kind of people we interact with, competence and IQ-wise, they're more or less there, right? So it's basically a very minute difference between competence and IQ level of the people we onboard or work with. So I think, although it matters, of course, I'm not saying that, hire somebody super incompetent. So there has to be a minimum level of IQ and competence. Above that, it's all, in my view, these are the three things that will make a difference. And not only competence will make a difference. So if you hire somebody who's super confident, but is lacking those three things that I talked about, trust me, it will not work.
So you mentioned earlier you want to get into the Jeep rally scene. When can I invite you to join me as either my navigator or I'll become yours?
Oh man, why the navigator? I thought you'll be my host and you'll become the co-driver and I will be driving. No, to be honest, I'm really, really passionate about motorsports. Like I've been following them on, various channels. And I really, really want to participate in this Cholistan and all the desert rallies. I've never
Maybe
done it
maybe you
earlier.
can get maybe you can get Kareem to brand it. I'm happy to take on sponsors for my rally vehicle.
By the way, which reminds me, like Kareem, let me tell you one thing: we've never done any sponsorship financially. We always do a
Wow.
barter, and we end up getting a better output based out of those barter deals. But having that said, of course, we can always do a barter marketing campaign with these rallies because I truly believe that this is part of tourism, and we should do as a company and as a citizen of Pakistan, we should do anything in our capacity to promote tourism in our country. And of course,
No,
Jeep
and
Rally
I think
is
that's I
fantastic for that.
think the thing with the Jeep Rally scene is that it allows people to see parts of Pakistan they haven't seen before. And this is a beautiful country with some incredible terrain. And I've been very fortunate having had the opportunity to not just participate in the rallies, but go out and see. And I think that, however Kareem participates, whether it's through BART or whatever, I think it should plug itself in with the motorsports associations that exist. And at least bring the brand there, bring some sort of mileage there, because there's this dedicated group of people who've been doing it for years. And I think that getting more publicity on a national level can really do it benefit. It would be amazing to get international drivers come and drive in Pakistan.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this is the most one of the most under-celebrated sports in Pakistan. Globally, it's the third biggest sport in the world,
Correct.
sports. So I think there's a huge potential here, and the kind of terrain we have. I was listening to Nadir Maksi's interview on Park Wheels few days back. The kind of terrains we have in Pakistan, that these are amazing. From Cholistan up till Gilgit-Baltistan,
Correct.
we have amazing terrain for these rallies.
Great. Well, Zeeshan, we're almost out of time. Any parting words of advice for young guys looking to get into Kareem and businesses like startups? What's the one takeaway message you want to leave for them? Because there's a whole bunch of them wanting to get into startups or start their own startups. So what would you
Yes.
leave for them?
I
Resilience
think,
was a good one. I like
yeah,
that one. I think that's
I
important
think
in startup culture.
two things. So rather than startups, I wanted to give a general message, mostly to people who've been, living abroad, Pakistanis living abroad. One thing when I was in the US and in the Middle East, I noticed what there was a lot of Pakistanis who would always talk bad about Pakistan. So I think my advice to them is, start loving your country. Do not disconnect yourself with your roots. I've seen a lot of people who forget their roots and they end up into some sort of disaster. The people who've always stayed connected to their roots, they will succeed. They have a proper identity and they will be respected throughout the world. So that's a general message. And generally for startups, I think one thing that I've probably learned from Kareem is that never give up. There will be times where you won't be finding VCs. There will be time where everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Hmm.
But if you're able to successfully come out of that time and have the right mindset and have the belief, you will do wonders. So I think these are my 2 cents on startups as well as generally for Pakistanis.
Great words of advice and great points to end on. Thank you so much, Zeeshan, for joining us on episode 17. And thank you all for tuning in. Please leave your comments below on your thoughts on the episode and who you would like to see next. People like Zeeshan are abundant in this country, dedicated to the cause of Pakistan. And we'd love to get more people like this to talk to you about how to have a successful career. So once again, Zeeshan, thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for the
much,
time.
Faizan. Thank you for once again for inviting me here. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.